So 14.9b has been out for a minute and you're still lost on what to play. But don't worry my friends, because Xayah is here to tell you what the meta is in this patch. In this video, I'm going to cover the strongest comps, strongest emblems, strongest artifact items, and strongest support items. Before we start, the information for this meta guide was made by the top Vietnamese players, Kium and YBY1. For those that don't know them, Kium is a pretty high elo player in Vietnam, and YBY1 typically plays and boxes bootcamp and usually hits rank 1 in the ending servers. If you want to see all the information about it yourself, you can check in the description down below. And then with that in mind, we're going to be talking about the strongest comps to play, and then in the S tier, it would be Annie, Porcelain. This comp is not any different from just having Annie, Lilia, and Ashe. The only difference is you just have a spat on Annie. Next to that, it would be Fortune, Kaisa. You're not actually playing Fortune with Kaisa. You're playing Fortune early so you can get resources to play Kaisa later at stage like 2 or 3, then you cash out, then play Bruiser Kaisa. And then I would say this is the strongest comp to play, which is Dryad, Faded, Syndra. Up next on the A tier, it would be 8 Duelist. 6 Duelist is okay, but having 8 Duelists actually maximizes the board. And then next to that, it would be 6 or 8 Arcanist Syndra. Having 8 Arcanists will maximize the board, same thing like Duelist. Then next to that would be Ashe Flex. It's either playing the Ashe Invoker style with Lilia and Annie, or Ashe Warden is okay for Warden for snipers in the back, or instead of 4 snipers, it's 2 sniper with 4 Porcelain. And then next to that, it would be Bruiser Kaisa, which is the same thing as Fortune Kaisa, but the difference is you have less resources. Next up, we got the A- tier, and what we got here is Reroll Gnar. Reroll Gnar is very powerful unless you have a Dryad spat, because if you play 6 Dryad, it maximizes the board. Next to that, it would be having a Wit's End on Bard is very, very powerful. Just playing Bard Reroll alone is not strong enough. If you have a Wit's End, it makes him even stronger, that can compete even against the strongest comps. Next to that is Umbral. It's not really a Reroll a loon comp. You could just play 6 Umbral and then fast 9 with it. Playing legendary units on the board, and if you have a spat, even better, you can throw it on Aurelia or some sort of legendary unit. It'll be powerful with the Umbral spat. Next to that is Heavenly Kayn. Since they just nerfed Kayn recently on this patch, throwing a Heavenly spat on him will maximize his damage and his lifesteal. And then next to that, it's the same thing like Heavenly Kayn, which is Heavily Lee Sin. The only difference is you don't need to put Heavenly spat on Lee Sin because Lee Sin is just strong enough compared to Kayn. Since they nerfed Kayn last patch, but this patch didn't do anything to Lee Sin, so therefore he's kind of better. And then next to that, it would be legendary board Xayah. This board is very powerful if you have enough money. And then same idea with Azir. If you have money, you can play legendary board Azir. And now we're gonna go more in depth with the comps. First up here is the Annie and Ashe Porcelain flex. This comp is probably like one of the strongest comps to play because it has both physical and magical damage. Your main carry is technically Ashe, where you have a Rage Blade, which is the main item you want to focus on her, and then Last Whisper, and then plus 180 items such as Giant Slayer, Death Blade, IE. And then because you always need an anti-healer, Lilia is a good Merlacon user. So you just throw the anti-heal item on her. You can even throw red buff on her, which is also pretty good too. If you have a Porcelain spat, you can just throw on Annie, which is the best item holder for it because it makes her do even more damage and she's also even more tankier with it. And then you just throw whatever tank items you can on Annie. And then to fill up the board, you get Amumu, Lysandra. You can't really see it because Annika's elbow is in the way, but Lux, so you can get 4 Porcelain in. Unless if you have the Porcelain spat, you can get rid of Lux, throw in a +1 unit. And then you have Kog'Maw that synergizes with Ashe, so you get Sniper. And then Azir, Kog'Maw, Lilia, and Annie, they synergize together to get 4 Invoker. Next up, we got Kaisa Bruiser. This comp is one of the most strongest comps to play even after like 20 nerfs, and she's still one of the strong comps to play. The way how you play this comp is just having 4 Bruiser, the main tank is Galio, and then you have 4 Trick Shot, and the main carry would be Kaisa. Kaisa's best item is Last Whisper, and then the rest items don't matter. You can get IE, Death Blade, Giant Slayer, Spirit Soldier, Hodge, or even Guard Breaker. Like any other damage item after that, it's fine. And then you can't see him again because of Annika's elbow, my bad, but you always need a Merlacon user. And then the Merlacon user for this board will be Teemo. And then if you have leftover 80 items, you can throw it on Xayah. And if you have a Thieves Gloves or like some sort of AP Bruiser items, you can throw it on Silas. And then when you hit level 9, you can throw it in Udyr, so you can get in the Ink Shadow item. Up next, we got Syndra, the Faded variation of it. This comp, for me personally, I would say is the strongest comp to play because it has the highest DPS. Since they buffed Syndra recently. And then for Syndra, her best items is double Adaptive Helm plus 1 AP item. If you cannot build 2 Adaptive Helm, at least get Adaptive Helm plus blue buff. Or if you really have to, a Spirit Soldier is okay. It's not the best though, but you gotta work with what you can have. And then you need Magic Shred item. So Static Shiv would be the best on Kindred. Or if not, you can have Onyx Spark on Thresh. And then you do need an anti-heal item, so you can throw Merlacon on Kindred. Or you can throw a Sunfire on Thresh. And then if you have a Spat, like for example Faded Spat, you throw it on Ornn, then throw in +1 Faded at level 9. Or if you have a Dryad Spat, then you throw in Rek'Sai, and then throw in the Dryad Spat on either Thresh or just Set or someone. Next up we got Vertical Duelist, and these would be the best item for Volibear. Is Bloodthirster Titans. You can have a second Titans, or if you must build it, you can also build a Crown Guard. Crown Guard is actually pretty good on Volibear because he's also AP. And then for the Lee Sin carry route, it would be Bloodthirster, Titans, and Edge of Knights. Same thing with like Volibear, you could do double Titans, or if not, you could do +1 Edge of Knights, or even a Hodge or a QSS. And then if you have a Duelist spat, you throw it on Wukong. But if you don't have a Duelist spat, then you can play 6 Duelists and throw it on Diana, so you can also get Sage plus Dragonlord for Lee Sin. And then if you have like extra items left over, you can throw in like an Even Shroud on Kiana, so you can have some sort of armor break for the board. And then if you want anti-heal, you can throw in either Sunfire or red buff on either Aurelia or Tristana to hold the red buff. And then for Tristana, any sword items is good, like Giant Slayer, IE. I wouldn't say Deathblade's too good on her because of the way her ability works. And then if you want her to heal the board, like Gunblade's good on her, or even Hawk is good on her. But yeah, typically this is just a basic board of vertical duelists where you have like 6 to 8 duelists that just shreds everything down. Next up, we got the Syndra Arcanist route. This comp is really good if you have an Arcanist spat, so you can play 8 Arcanist instead. But typically for this board, it would be Syndra carry, and the items are different compared to the faded one. For this variation, you want blue buff instead with a Nashor's Tooth, so she can keep casting while auto attacking, and then +1 AP item like Death Cap, Jewel Gauntlet, Archangel Staff, and then you just throw in all the Arcanists on the board. But if you don't have an Arcanist spat and you still want to play this, you can throw in a Set and a Nautilus instead of a Zoe and Nico, so you can have 4 Warden and 6 Arcanists. And then you do need some sort of Magic Resist Shred item on the board, so you can have like Onyx Spark on a Mumu, or you can put like a Static Shiv on like Ari or Lux. And if you want anti-heal, you can throw Sunfire on Alawi, or Merlocon on Ari or Lux. Up next is Gnar Reroll with a Dryad spat. This comp is only strong unless you have either the Dryad spat or the Dryad augments. And if you do play this comp, obviously the carry is Gnar with Bloodthirster Titans +1, like either Hodge or another Titans, or even Asterix if you have to. And then you want a level 3 Gnar with Kindred. And then Kindred has the anti-heal item, which is Merlocon or red buff. And then +1 mana item on her, like Spirit Soldier or blue buff, so she can keep casting infinitely. And then the best Dryad spat holder, I would say, is Aatrox because he's AP. Typically, you can throw it on Alawi as well. She'll be pretty good with it. But if you get Aatrox 3, I would prefer to put on Aatrox instead. And then you can try to 3-star Shen as well. So typically, it's just 3-star all the 2-cost units if you can. And you throw in all the Dryad units if you can. And you synergize it with like random Ghostlies. But if not, you can throw in like better units. Like if you don't have Aatrox 3 yet, you can throw in a Silas instead because he's a pretty good unit. And then instead of Shen, you can just throw in Udyr for like the legendary route. Next up, we got Bard reroll. You only want to play this comp unless you have a Wit's End, because that's the only way to play Bard at the moment, since Bard is actually not typically too strong, but the item itself on Bard makes him like a really strong unit. And then your main tank would be Tahm Kench, and the safety of Tahm Kench having this Orange artifact Forbidden Idol is very, very strong on Tahm Kench as well. It has like a 17% win rate or something or higher. And then to fill up the board, you get Bard, Tahm Kench, and Nico to have 3 Mythic in, and you throw in Riven, Zoe, and Sivir, so you can have Storyweaver in. And then you have Soraka, Rakan, and Riven to throw in a Tourist. And then Tahm Kench and Riven with Bruiser. And then Sivir and Bard for Trick Shot, Zoe and Nico for Arcanist. So this board has a lot of small synergies going, so I can power up Bard to do as much damage as you can. Next up, we got is Umbral. The main carry unit you want is Silas. Silas with Onyx Spark is very powerful for this board because you play with double AP carries such as Alun. And then instead of having Crown Guard, Titans is actually a lot better to have on Silas because Umbral gives you a shield and it'll make him stack Titans faster. And then if you want him to cast Infinite, having an Adaptive Hub is very good because it gives him that tankiness and it gives him that cast that he could just keep doing over and over. And it looks kind of jumbled up at the moment, but this one makes more sense after I'll explain Alun. Alun's best item would be Spear Soldier, Merlocon, +1 AP item such as Archangel Staff is one of her best, or you can go Death Cap and Jewel Gauntlet. And then you would play with Set, and since Set is a warden, you can throw in a Nautilus, or if you have a Spat, you play with Yone, with Kayn. Kayn is one of the good like spat holders with Umbral. And then because you have Darius in as a duelist, you could throw in Aurelia, which is one of the best Umbral spat holders because Aurelia typically hits everything on the board, so her execution would work right away with the Umbral spat. And then if you have a York in, you could throw in an Ornn for that Behemoth, or you could just throw in Udyr, that works too. And then if you have room, you can throw in Azir as well. So you can choose from Azir, Nautilus, Kayn, Aurelia, and Ornn for the plus synergies on the board, but you just want all the 6 Umbral units on the board. Even if you have a spat, it's still good to have all of them because the Umbral execution is very powerful. Next up we got is Heavenly, and like the last one, it looks kind of jumbled up, but I'll explain more in detail. You play all the Heavenly units that you can, and then you can either play Lee Sin carry, but if you have a Lee Sin carry, you have to have a Soraka in. But if you have a Kayn carry with a Heavenly spat, then you throw in with Morgana instead of Soraka, and then you can throw in Diana or Udyr to fit in the synergies. I would say Diana is a lot better because you get Sage with Wukong, and And if you play with Lee Sin, it gives you a Dragon Lord. Or if not, you can just take out Diana, throw in Udyr, so you can have that +1 legendary on the board. And then for Morgana or Soraka, they're the best Merlocon item holders. If you don't want either of Soraka or Morgana, you can throw in a Hui instead. And Hui is very powerful with Heavenly because he would heal the whole board. Next up, we got our legendary board Xayah. This board is very powerful at the moment because they did buff Xayah like last patch. And her best items is literally like all the sword items you can fit on her. And then you want to put Last Whisper on Kaisa because she's a better Last Whisper holder since she hits the whole board consistently. And then your main tank would be Ornn. Bramble and Declaw is actually very powerful on him because his ability has a shield. Or if not, you could do Gargoyle Stoneplates are fine as well. And you try to throw in as much Dragon Lord as you can, like Janna, Diana, and Lee Sin. And then if you have AP items, you can just throw it on Azir. And then the last legendary board unit is Azir. Azir is very powerful at the moment with Adaptive Helm. The reason why Adaptive Helm over Spirit Soldier is because Spirit Soldier takes a bit of time for him to rack up mana compared to Adaptive Helm. And Adaptive Helm also gives him really good amount of AP. And then the Merlocon item holder you want to put on is like Soraka. And then same thing like last comp, which is like Xayah. You throw tank items on Ornn, and then you throw in Rakan and Diana instead of having Lee Sin and Diana. And then you have a Wukong in, so you can have the strong synergies of Sage and Naturistan. And you can throw in like a +1 legendary like Lysandra because she's very powerful at the moment and she can like give you a lot of resources. Now we're gonna move on to the emblem segment. The best items you want to do is Porcelain, because as we saw earlier, Annie is a very powerful one, and Ashe is very powerful at the moment too as well. And then the next S tier spats would be Dryad, because you can play with Dryad Syndra, or you can play with Gnar Reroll Dryad. And then for the A tier, Umbral is very good, because you can have more execution on the board, or if you can't hit that set, then having that extra spat will help a lot. And then Heavenly is a very powerful one for close range, Kayn and Lee Sin, and it gives you more like Heavenly stats as well, because they also changed Heavenly where like you get 70% more stats if you're a Heavenly unit, and then the other units themselves don't really get as much stats anymore like they did last patch. And Fade is a very powerful one because same thing like Dryad, Fade Dryad, and then Duelist so you can maximize your Duelist board, and then Fortune so you can play Fortune Kaisa. And for A minus, playing for 7 Story Reaver is actually still pretty good. Like, KO actually does a pretty good amount of damage though, so you can play full AP KO. And a Taurus Spat is a pretty good splash trade because it gives you more armor and magic resist. And Dragalore Spat is very good because Lee Sin is very powerful at the moment. And then the Arcanist Spat, so you can play for 8 Arcanists. And there's no point in talking about B and C. If you get this, try to make do with them. Like, I'll say Sage is actually pretty good because Sage Silas comp is pretty decent at the moment, but even then it's like kind of hard to play Silas because he's super contested right now. Now we're finally getting onto the Ornn artifact items, and the best for strong and versatile, meaning you can play in every comp in any situation, like no matter what, is good. Suspicious Trenchcoat is a very good one because it gives you 3 units on the board after your main unit that you put the item on goes like almost below 50% health. And then Eternal Winter is a very powerful tank item because it stuns like the whole board basically, whoever hits them. And then Diamond Hands is a very good tank item. It's very good early game too because it gives you money, and it also makes that one tank invulnerable for a couple seconds. And then Manazane is very powerful at the moment because it's very good on Kaisa. It's decent on Syndra, but you need Syndra with Adaptive Helm on it or blue buff. Like, you can't just put this on Syndra by itself and then expect it to do something later. It's also pretty good on Hui. It's also pretty good on Azir. It's also pretty good on Janna Reroll if you do play that too. Overall, it's just good stat wise. Like, it has pretty good high AD and high attack speed. Essentially saying it's just very good overall because all the main carry units can use it, like Ashe, Kaisa, Lilia, and like Azir and Hui. Alright, the next time we're going to talk about the strong on specific units. Like, Trinity Force is very powerful on close range units such as Volibear, Lee Sin, and Kayn. It's also pretty decent on Kaisa as well because it gives her pretty decent stats. Rapid Fire Cannon is very powerful on Lee Sin, and it's also pretty good on Ashe because for Ashe, it gives her more attack speed. It's like a Rage Blade substitute. And if for Lee Sin, he can hit from the second hex. It also allows him to hit his ability too from that distance, and it actually works, funny enough. Forbidden Idol is very powerful on Tahm Kench if you play that route. Or if not, you can throw it on like the tank units such as like Galio, Thresh. DFG is very powerful itself because it almost executes a tank, and it also gives the AP unit pretty decent stats as well. Collector is very powerful on Kaisa and is very good early game, so you can like tempo with money and the execution. Witsend is very powerful on Bard. If not, you could throw it on Silas and Ashe. Silver Mirror is very good in general as like a support item. It's technically like a Eternal Winter because it's a free stun. You don't want to put this on your carry units. You want to put it on like a secondary carry unit or third because it gives them a stun, but it also makes them lose attack speed. And then Sniper's Focus is very powerful on like Ashe and Kaisa, like the long range 80 units. Or if not, it's actually pretty good on Azir as well. Lichbane is very powerful on Kindred, so it makes you tempo pretty hard early game. If not, you could throw it on Syndra because she casts a lot. Innervating Locket is very powerful on Annie because it makes her cast infinite. If not, you could throw it on like Thresh or even Galio's fine. And Azonius is very good on every AP unit overall. Next up, we got the versatile items, meaning like it's okay. It's not like too strong as the strong in specific units, but it's still doable. So Mittens is actually pretty good on almost every close range unit because it gives them attack speed, movement speed, and damage reduction. The Thief's Gloves for Ornn artifacts is very powerful because you can just throw it on a secondary unit and then they'll just like carry you for a bit early game. Lashio Crest is very powerful on most tanks, especially Galio and especially Thresh because they share the armor and magic resist. Spirit is a pretty decent tank item. It just gives you a lot of health regen and it gives you a lot of magic resist, but the problem is there's a lot of anti-heal going on, so I don't think it's that good of an item at the moment, but it's still pretty decent to have. Hull Crusher is okay. It's good for like just throwing it on a secondary tank because it gives them extra stats, but you have to isolate them though, which is the only downfall of the item. Defiance is also an okay item for close range units because it gives them Omnivamp and they take less damage, but in the end, this set's pretty burst heavy, so the Defiance is like kinda weak. And then for things that's not a huge upgrade, you kinda don't want to touch these at all. They're only good in like specific reasons. Like Talisman is very bad now because they nerfed it very hard. Ludus Tempest is okay, but like it's just not strong enough because you have to kill something. Unending Despair is pretty weak because you have to wait for your shield to pop to do damage. Seeker's Augur is actually pretty good in general. I would say it's good for Silas and it's very good for the Shen Augment build. And then the rest items are like, eh. But like Blight and Jeweled is actually pretty good on Syndra and Morgana because they actually have a lot of tick damage. And Spectral Cutlass is a very powerful item on Kayn. Like it just makes him into a different unit because it turns into basically like an assassin. And then these items are basically just useless. Don't even touch them. Like like just never grab these. They don't do anything. And now we're finally moving on to the support items. For the good on many comps, basically S tier. Unstable Treasure Chest is probably one of the best, if not the second best support item you can have because if the unit dies, it gives you 3 more items on your board. And then hands down, probably the best support item ever is Moonstone Renewer. This item is so powerful because it gives you like infinite shield on the board like every 4 seconds. And then Shroud of Stillness is actually pretty good because it matter reaves like half of the board and it gives you 8 HP for your whole board as well. Zephyr is also a very powerful one. This used to be an item back in the day, but now they have to make it to a support item because how cheesy it is because it disables one unit out of the fight for like 10 seconds and it gives you attack speed on the board. Virtue is very powerful tank item. It's like a more powerful redemption because it heals your whole board. And then Aegis is a very powerful stat item because it gives you armor and magic resist and attack speed for your whole board. And then now we're gonna finally move on to good on some comps, which is basically like A tier. Redemption's only really good on like Heavenly, I would say, or even like the Ashe comp, I guess is okay. Like the rest of the board, it's not too good on. Like even on like Kaisa Bruiser, it's kind of wacky because the positioning can be kind of weird. And then Zeke's is only good on Kaisa and Ashe because there are only like 80 units that would use it. Maybe Duelist can use it pretty well, but there's no point because they have a lot of attack speed anyways. Banshees is very good on like close range units or like same thing again like Kaisa and Ashe again. Locket I would say is very good on many comps, but I can see why they would say only on some comps because Ashe comp, for example, only has like 3 frontline, so it's kind of losing the value because you don't have 6 frontline. But it's very good on Duelist though, and it's very good on Kaisa Bruiser. And then Chalice is only really good on like AP comps such as like Syndra or like Azir and stuff like that. And then Black Cleaver is only good on a handful of units, but it's still pretty good for like most comps. And then low priority is like you don't really want to pick them up unless for specific reasons. Like for example, Big Gem is very powerful on Faded because Faded is a stall comp and you want to put that on them. It's very good on Ashe as well because Ashe is a pretty much a stall comp. And then ZZ Rot is a very powerful first support item if you can't get the rest of these because it gives you a +1 unit. And then always avoid Spite. I feel like it's pretty good on like Duelist because it gives them stats, but it doesn't really do anything for the rest of the comps because all it does is just debuff the front line and it doesn't debuff the back line. But it buffs your front line though, so that's why it's pretty good. I would say it's pretty good on Duelist for that reason. And that's pretty much about it for 14.9b meta guide. If you have any questions, just let me know in the comments below. Until then, see you guys next time. Peace.